Welcome to Implicating the Real. Today's show is part 2 of the conversation began in the previous episode. Let's get right into it. Hope you enjoy.
I'll just read a quote here. We're on topic. The subordinate points also serve as a way as supporters, as structural intensifications within the unseen fabric of energy that forms all realities and manifestations. While they are traces or accumulations of pure energy, there is a great difference between the amount of energy available in the various subordinate points and between the main and absolute points.
You got ley lines, right?
Yeah, just that terminology, structural intensifications within the unseen fabric of energy.
Yeah.
That's a very non-physical way of trying to imagine what's happening here.
Mm-hmm. But part of it is physical though, right? Like, because isn't there a part where Seth talks about like, you can choose to like live in a neighborhood that's on one of these like lines that connects these structural points, and that like not even just being on the point, but being on like one of the lines that like on the connection of the two is like that can also like be like a successful way of like choosing a place to live or something like that.
Yeah, right below that. Some people can sense such neighborhoods instinctively. They occur within certain angles made by coordinate points. Now, I don't know, the term neighborhoods, I thought he's using that as like the subordinate points. Not specifically like neighborhoods within.
I thought he was talking about like, you know, like literally like neighborhoods, like where you live.
I mean, maybe he's getting specific within like the area of the subordinated points. I mean,
but then like later on the regions become like, you know, continental regions, not necessarily like, you know, oh, the like east side of this town is better than the west side of this town.
I mean, he's saying they may be deduced mathematically, but I'm also like a little bit confused if here he's talking about the physical angles or a more metaphysical angle. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure.
My mind's too gripped by the grid. I'm just seeing it as physical.
Yeah. This is really repeating this, but like somehow the words he uses like just helps it sink in for me. These points are like invisible power plants. In other words, activated when any emotional feeling or thought of sufficient intensity comes into contact. The points themselves intensify whatever activates them in quite a neutral manner. This is kind of where he's speaking of like a threshold of sufficient intensity.
Yeah.
And one thing that he's not getting into here, and I don't know if he does anywhere, that I'm curious about in a very practical manner, is like, let's say I want something. I'm taking this seriously, but I don't feel like I want it intensely enough. Can I manufacture intensity to bring it about? And the way where I landed on is kind of like intentionality or prayer or like, you know, just like, or time. You know, he's saying like our idea of time is actually intensity. And so like, if I'm putting more time into it, by virtue, I am putting more intensity to it.
Yeah, that has to do with a lot of like, I think people's understanding like in the like modern, like current contemporary day of like how like magical like stuff works, right? Where like, if you're making a sigil, it's like the fact that you're focusing on it while you're making it, like extends the amount of focus you're putting into the thing. Instead of just like saying, oh, I want this thing, you're like, I want this thing so much I will dedicate an entire afternoon into like in a very detailed way, like graphing it out onto a piece of paper, you know, or like you said, prayer, right? Like, it's not just like, oh, I really wish I could have this thing. It's like, no, I want this thing so much I'm going to go to this building that was created specifically for this purpose to interact with all of the people that I'm neighbors with.
Yeah.
And have all of them wish for the same thing with me at the same time.
Yeah.
Right?
Or like meditation or suggestion, as Seth would put it. And I can't wait till we get into some of that. But it also answers the question I had. You know, like Seth says, free will always operates. So we're getting outside of the chapter a little bit, but I just like this sort of speculation. Like, to me, it's intuitive or self-evident that free will is operating. But the place that I wonder, does it exist, is like, can we choose what we want? And I feel like maybe that's kind of like our higher self, like before we take birth, we're deciding to like, these are my main values going into this lifetime. I want to develop in this certain way. But like, I feel like that question always remains for every level. Do we get to decide what we want? The only thing I feel beholden to or determined by are my values and my wants. Like, you know, if I felt like I could actually decide whatever I wanted in this life, I had that power, I would ask like, well, why don't I just decide that I want spinach, that I like spinach, and then I would in theory be healthier, you know? Or like, why don't I decide that I like intense exercise?
Mm-hmm.
And I've played with that a little bit. You know, I run a 5K once a week. And so that's one place where you can kind of find this threshold to play with, like, there's a comfortable zone and there's an uncomfortable zone and maybe a painful zone. Some people talk about like a runner's high. But the way I've gotten into that is like, and it relates to something I heard from Seth. I'll have to try to figure out where, but like I look at the joy that a dog has or children have when they're playing. Like if you watch a kid like swimming in a lake that's kind of cold, their lip is like blue and quivering, but they're like, they don't even care. They're having such a good time. Like they're just tuned into the positive part of that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Where if it was an adult, they'd be like, this sucks. I want to be dry. I want to be warm.
Right.
There's not amount of fun almost that an adult could have to like suffer that way. But
Well, don't count all adults out.
No.
There are those crazy polar plunge people.
Yeah, no, I did date someone that like swims year round in this part of the world outside. Yeah. But where I'm getting to with this is like, I feel like inside my cells or cellular consciousness, as Seth would say, there is like, he says like, they just enjoy experience of whatever kind. And I think I can tap into that to some extent, or we can when we're exercising. Like I can try to embrace that, the part of myself that is like running. Yes. You know?
Yeah.
Like, and it's easier said than done, I think, but I think there's something there. So bringing this all the way back, this is just my idea of like, can we choose what we want? Are we beholden to that? Sorry, it's a little tangent, but
No, yeah. Like, it's the thing I sort of wondered about with this chapter too. Because, like, we've been talking about sort of the higher self creating reality for us, sort of. And it seems like in this chapter, it's sort of like switches focus. And when we're talking about like the emotions and the desires creating reality, it seems like it's like our like physical selves, emotions and desires, you know? Because otherwise these coordinate points wouldn't matter, you know?
No, that's true. The way I kind of square that a little bit is that we are our higher self, but it's like outside of time, and it's this past this arbitrary disconnection. You know, we've made an arbitrary separation. We're kind of like forgetting that higher self. But like to say like, I want this now in time is the same thing as saying that higher self is choosing that in the spacious present that's outside of time.
Right. But then our connection to the coordinate points shouldn't matter, right?
I don't know. Why?
Because couldn't your higher self create that thing regardless of where you are? And then if there's like a longer buffer to like have it load in, just like create it earlier so it gets to you right on time?
I think that phenomenon you're describing is just part of like the game we're choosing to play in this, having this experience.
That we can't materialize everything we'd want to materialize?
Because if we did, it would be abject chaos. If you thought something and it materialized instantly, I mean, the world would blow up probably in a moment. Think of all like the anxious thoughts you have, the intrusive thoughts you have.
Yeah.
Seth says we're learning how to manipulate energy. We're learning to control. We're learning to be aware of this.
But then so with all those anxious thoughts, is it that my higher self having the anxious thoughts too?
No, it's your beliefs. It's the beliefs that you as a human chose to have. At some point, you decided to believe in something as opposed to rejecting it. And your beliefs, essentially, when you're thinking on autopilot, will dictate your thoughts, expectations, feelings, and imaginings. That's why Seth, in the next book, he goes deeply into how your beliefs create reality and that you should change your beliefs to change everything downstream.
I thought that in this one it was saying that like your emotions make things materialize. Or is it
They
that
do.
the emotional intensity you have towards the belief makes the belief be true?
Both.
Okay.
But if you want to change the emotions really upstream, you would change the root belief. Because the same event can happen to two different people, and they can respond vastly different in terms of emotion because of their beliefs.
Yeah, that's well put.
But then, so the emotion carries through between the higher and lower self.
Yeah, like the emotion. So I'm going to go back just a little bit, but I think of like our higher self is like a tree, and we're kind of this new consciousness that it's decided to seed in
Or a
this.
nut.
Yeah, we're like a fruit or something growing on the tree. But we're like a brand new consciousness in some sense. We're like learning from the beginning.
Right.
Someday we might also be a tree in the same sense as our higher self is. But like, it's because we are this separate thing, but the same thing, but having this new experience that I think is like giving some of us trouble with understanding this. I mean, it's tricky. Does that clarify anything?
I just wonder what the point of the coordinate points is. Like, why are they necessary for what's going on here?
So I think it's he's saying that this is like basically the energy of all realities, these four main points, but like the subordinate ones specifically are part of he's using these words like structural intensifications and, like energy boosters, or I don't know what he said exactly, but like,
right, yeah.
When we're playing this game of like, we are this new consciousness learning how to manipulate the creation of our own reality, a variety of different, boost levels seem to be helpful. He's saying like, this will intensify anything, in a quite neutral manner. Later, he will clarify that like, fortunately, negative thoughts don't manifest quite as easily.
Okay.
And I also think that the four main points are like what we were talking about previously. They're primary reality. I think this because he says these points exist across all realities, including like the subset realities and the superset realities.
Right.
So I don't look at it from the perspective of why are they there. They just are. Like that's the default given that we have. They just exist. We didn't manufacture them. They're just
So the 4 points would, if they're fundamental reality, and fundamental reality is sort of like an undifferentiated, like chaotic blend of everything, right?
I don't see primary. I don't know. In my mind, this is just my opinion, not what Seth says. In my mind, the most primary reality is just consciousness. It's the consciousness of all that is.
Yeah, it's
just awareness.
It's like oneness, right? Like for something to be like the most fundamental reality, it would have to be undifferentiated. Otherwise, it would be two different separate sections of reality, which means it's not primary, right?
I think we have to like remind ourselves that our ability to imagine this is limited,
Sure.
like an ultimate thing. And to like say that, a fundamental reality should or has to be a certain way comes from a limited place.
Well, that's just like the application of like necessity and conditionality, right?
Yeah, but I mean, we've talked about like infinity before.
Yeah.
Like we see what it is relative to our concepts, like our mathematical concepts of like number values and stuff, but like it kind of defies the whole system in itself, like, right? Like we really can't grasp that idea. We kind of have, we have a finger that points in the direction of that idea, but we can't grasp that idea.
Yeah. I guess all of that was sort of to just get to the point of asking like, is it really 4 different points or is it 4 locations for one thing,
It makes me, I always just go back to the Jewish proverb of like the desire for limitation, the virtue of taking on limitation. Like you could swap out limitation for differentiation almost.
Yeah.
Why does the all-powerful, all-knowing, all-seeing God, what is the one thing it doesn't have is limitation.
Right. And then by, ascending, you achieve gnosis and like become one with like the all being or whatever.
Right. Except Seth would say, like, going back to like we talked about previously, like one of my favorite quotes is like, the perfection you seek is not ever a finished, but a becoming quality. So the idea is that like, there's never the static endpoint. And this is why I'm pointing to our limited ability to imagine as finite beings. We can get to that place that we might call like oneness or heaven or something. And well before we get there, our ability to imagine even beyond that concept is just going to continue. So it's always becoming. And this gets into infinity. It's not going to stop. It's just this ultimate continuing development and growth and experience.
Yeah.
And I think he said before when describing like the different layers of consciousness or the relationship between like a human or an ego and their entity, he has used vertical adjectives like above or ascension, but he's said like this is not meant to imply that one is better than the other. Like you are not any lesser than your entity. So I think that he would maybe point that out if you were to see you use the word ascension.
Hmm.
And I think part of what this book is about is to teach people that they are essentially connected to everything. They are multidimensional beings and that you can access everything now. It's just that because of the beliefs that society imposes on you, you don't think that. You just think that you're a mere human who has to rely on the five senses and intellect and just like observable facts.
Okay. So there isn't sort of like this like goal-oriented nature to human existence. Because that's what I had been taking from it, is that the goal was sort of ascension, right?
It's development, I think.
I think it's like development and exploration, like
'Cause this-
curiosity.
These borders between, he said there's no real borders exist between consciousness, but to the extent that they do, they're borders of ability and capacity to like perceive and to, and when he's saying undifferentiated chaos, that's relative to a limited perceiver. Like,
Well, by definition, right?
yeah, but he's not saying that's like a fundamental condition that is, it's only undifferentiated chaos to us. And so like part of the constraints that we're in, part of the virtues of him, it's like filtering out the chaos. We're developing our ability to take in more information, to be sensitive to more frequencies, if you will.
I see what you're
And
saying.
as we develop, we can graduate into like deeper reality.
Well, it does seem like one that's higher than the other then.
Yeah.
But they're not as necessarily better, is his point.
They're better at differentiating chaos.
But worse at being undifferentiated.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I guess just the term ascension to me has more of like a specific, it implies like exactly where you're going, and
It implies
isn't
Kool-Aid
point.
parties and stuff, you know?
Yeah. And yeah, there's enough of connotations that are like interesting, or what's the word? Someday we're gonna have
Fun
to make
and
like
cool?
a
I don't
top
know.
10 list of things that are a little fringy in the Seth material.
Oh yeah, there's gonna be more than 10, I
Yeah.
think.
Top 100.
Well,
Yeah, but I always think it's interesting that he doesn't avoid those topics.
yeah.
And I know talking to different people that are familiar with this material have different hangups on what those are for them. Like for some people, it's, the stuff he says about Christ, or other people, it's very interesting to see like where people get hung up on things.
Mm-hmm. Which page were you on with the last one that you read?
65.
I only had one note for 65.
Okay.
And I just had, oh no, I have two, never mind. He talks about feng shui a little bit, that's cool.
Like actual feng shui? What do you mean?
Because we were talking about neighborhoods a little while back.
Okay, yeah.
Here on the top of 65, in a given room, plants will grow more effectively in a particular area than in other areas, providing that both areas contain such necessary requirements as light. All of your space is permeated by these coordination points, so that certain invisible angles are formed.
Yeah. Later he makes like a specific analogy that these points that grow quick, or that make our thoughts and emotions grow quicker or materialize faster, are like analogous to sunlight.
Yeah.
And that makes it really intuitive to me. And I was going to bring up a quote we recently talked about last time, but like the quote about, where consciousness like gives off emanations. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have it pulled up here. Give me 1 second. As fire gives off light, cellularly tuned consciousness gives off dreams. I just thought like it's kind of relating to this idea that it's very intuitive when you think like, oh yeah, this place gets sun, things are going to grow more quickly and stronger in that spot. It seems like it's not a big jump to, if we're taking reality creation seriously, that there's something analogous to certain places.
Well, and it's like, it's this interesting idea of like the cells have their own creative potential. So like if the plant's within one of these ley lines, like the cells of the plant can create what they want to create more quickly, which is literally just the body of the plant. Like the cell of the plant wants to make a plant, and then it's like it just makes a plant.
Yeah. It's also interesting in the concept that like plants are obviously something to me that seems like it wants to grow in many directions as possible. Not all plants, but some of them it seems like that's literally what they're trying to do. And Seth says that about consciousness too. I really find the tree analogy very helpful in a lot of ways with this material.
Plants are really fascinating like that, you know?
Yeah, like it doesn't seem like a tree. Like last week we walked to see this mulberry tree, this cool mulberry tree that's like growing like horizontally on the ground and then like out over the water. And it's like, it seems like perfectly content to like grow in this way.
Yeah.
That like, or we talked about also like the way our culture defines things as normative or not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like somebody would categorize that tree as like being malformed.
Yeah, it's a bad tree, bad at being
But I
a tree.
think that tree just likes doing whatever it's doing.
Yeah. It all depends on if you like accept the idea of like the teleology of whatever a tree's like, you know, normatively supposed to be.
Teleology is one of those words where I never can hear the definition enough. And I know Joe, you can tie something together.
It's good because some people listening might not know teleology. So like a teleology, if something's teleological, it's sort of like end-oriented.
I always associate with the term should.
Should is more like normative.
Okay.
So like if you say something should or ought to be a certain way, that's normative. You're making like a normative claim, not about how the world is, but how the world like ought to be.
Okay.
But a teleological sort of description or argument or something would be like, the most common place most people will run into teleological arguments is when you're talking about animals, right? If you're talking about like how you have a plant and it has a seed, that seed already knows what kind of plant it's supposed to quote unquote be.
Mm-hmm.
It's end oriented. It knows if it's going to be a good walnut tree, it should grow in the way that a walnut tree grows.
Use the word should.
Yeah, there's sort of a shouldness to it,
Yep.
but it's sort of like it has a goal in mind.
Yeah,
right?
it's worth differentiating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where it seems that in the natural world, a lot of things have a state that they're striving towards that they don't always perfectly accomplish.
Yeah.
Like if you go to the doctor, they'll tell you like, well, what kidneys do is kidneys like blah, 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 blah about like the function of your kidney. But your kidney's not doing that. Where like you could presumably make the argument like, well, my kidney doesn't do that because that's not what my kidney does. And the doctor would say, no, that's just what all kidneys do.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like that I've actually had, maybe this is a sign of a good doctor, but I had my levels were a little bit out of range for something. Maybe it had to do with kidneys. But my doctor's like, maybe that's just the way yours are.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I like that better than you telling me there's something wrong with me when there's, you know, I'm not experiencing anything wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Or like when people are studying anatomy, you know, you have to do embryology because watching how embryos develop says a lot about how like later like anatomy develops.
Mm-hmm.
It's like embryos have these stages that they always go through before they become human shaped. Like, you know, they get the tadpole thing and they get the tail and then they lose the tail. And it's like, there's a question of like, why does it get and then lose a tail? It's like, that's the path of development that it does. Like that's its like orientation.
So the term teleological points to this, like, I don't want to call it predestined, but there's kind of
it is predestined.
There's kind of like a map there or like an ideal there.
Yeah, no, predestination is actually a really good way of thinking about it. It's like one of the few places in like modern thought that like this weird predestination idea still like lingers, because I think it's not popular with a lot of how people would think about their own lives, like being fated to do things or predestined to do things.
Yeah. In the context of my current understanding, I think my issue with it is that we're still too like binary. We're still like, do we have free will? Are we determined? And I think in Sethian terms, like he'll say that, yeah, you've taken on this concept. So in the same thing I was just referring to, like our higher self is making that decision in the spacious present. At the same time, we're experiencing this predestination as if like that's already kind of written for us and we have to go down this road. When in fact, outside of time, that decision is being chosen right then and there. It's just manifesting in time as something we can point to and think of as predestination.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that when you were talking earlier about saying like you feel like I think you said like your emotions about things are like the only thing that sort of like limits you.
Desires, like, do I get
Your
to
desires.
choose what my values are or my wants? Like, I felt like those are the one area that I've most recently questioned, where determinism can kind of slip in the back door.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, I was just going to interrogate it and be like, do you really think that it's only like your desires?
At this point, that's kind of my main kind of question about it. But
Yeah.
I still lean, even then, that free will is operating. And I guess I'm here to talk about Seth, and he always says that.
It's just, to me, like my view of the world and about like maturing in the world has a lot to do with like understanding limitation and accepting limitation, and knowing that like there are just built-in limitations to how the world is,
Yeah. I mean, maybe we'll have to have like a dedicated free will episode.
Yeah.
I think it's a topic that I will often get into, debates with people about. And something I often say is like, I think people tend to conflate free will with power. Doesn't mean you have like ultimate power to do everything, but to some extent it does mean that.
Right. Like
I don't have.
do I have the free will to fly a jet plane if I don't have a jet plane? Right.
Or you could go even farther, like somebody say like, well, if I really have free will, why can't I just fly without a plane? Why can't I just take off?
Right.
Right. And I think that would be where I would distinct, like you're talking about power. It doesn't mean you have ultimate power. And I think Seth is saying we have, within a context, we have free will. Like there is a type of infinite variety of paths without being like truly infinite at this point in time. If we're taking on limitation, that in itself says we don't have ultimate power.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we still, that's where it's interesting to like play with this idea of the higher self choosing like some sort of outline for your life and your development, and then giving this new consciousness, this fruit of the tree, that thing, in order to develop in any way it wants within that context.
Right. Yeah.
And I think there's places where Seth maybe talks about where people like kind of deviate where they're not supposed to.
Yeah. It just makes me think about how Seth consistently told Jane over the years that she would overcome her illness, and she didn't.
Overcome what?
Her illness.
Yeah.
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 Every day she decided not to change the beliefs that were holding her back.
Yeah.
And that was, in the way towards health, he constantly told her, like, I'm not going to belabor this point, or I'm not going to like force you to do anything, but
yeah,
if you want to get better, this is what you should do. And she just consistently. It's kind of like you guys should turn your bed facing north.
Yeah.
We didn't.
Yeah, we didn't do it. No spirit's gonna tell me what to do with my bed.
Yeah.
It makes me think this is a sort of oddity and stuff too, that like he said, if you're in your last reincarnation, you won't have children, but some people do.
Did he say that?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So he says some people do, and he said that those children have like, I kind of hate doing this because I just have like this very vague memory of this. Like we'll have to we're kind of doing what Seth does. We're like, we'll get into this at some point and then we'll just never get back to it.
Yeah.
Because there's so much. But like he says there's something, when they do have children, they're kind of limited in a way. They're have some sort of psychological abnormality or something.
That's
strange and controversial.
It's like it sort of reminds me of, because I've been reading Terry Pratchett books. It reminds me of like, there's if you're a wizard, you're like whatever, like the 8th son of somebody like has like magical powers and can become a wizard. But then if you're the 8th son of an 8th son, then you become a sorcerer. And you're like never supposed to do that if you're a wizard, because then
You're never supposed to have an eighth son.
Because then they'll become a sorcerer and they'll be too powerful.
It's too dangerous.
Yeah.
It's very interesting though. But I got a quote here. Each thought or emotion, therefore, exists as an electromagnetic energy unit, or as a combination of these under certain conditions, and often with the help of coordinate points, they emerge into the building blocks of physical matter. This emergence into matter occurs as a neutral result, resulting in quotes, regardless of the nature of any given thought or emotion. Mental images accompanied by strong emotion are blueprints, therefore, upon which a corresponding physical object or condition or event will in your terms appear. That the term blueprints is kind of helpful there. Mental images accompanied by strong emotion. So that's kind of what I was talking about with like, sometimes I want things and I'm like, why don't I feel this intensely? Like I know I want it. Or I question myself, do I really want this? Do I just think I want this? Because I think that's also a valid question. We talked a little bit about this, with certain people like going down the route of like, manifest that shit. Like,
Yeah.
where does you brought up the term like go to the end. Where does that come from?
Oh, Neville Goddard.
Neville Goddard.
Yeah.
What does go to the end?
It means like, instead of trying to figure out the circumstances or like trying to manifest the specific circumstances you think are going to bring you what you want, actually just sit down and ask yourself what you want. So like Michael was saying earlier that he was considering making it so that he likes intense exercise. And like in my mind, I was like, do you actually want to like intense exercise, or do you want, like the result of that? Do you want health? Do you want like to be buff or like whatever?
Mm-hmm.
So Neville Goddard, who is like this other spiritual teacher, who taught a lot of Sethian concepts before these books, he says that you should, instead of trying to imagine, like, say you're trying to imagine, like you're trying to manifest a relationship, instead of imagining or visualizing a text from your crush, you would just go all the way to marriage or whatever it is that you want. Or even beyond that, just going to the feeling of being appreciated, understood, loved, attractive, stuff like that.
Right, because the pathway to get you there might end up being like you get a dog and you're like, this is all I ever actually wanted anyways.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
The example I always give is, the person has like a vision board and it's all about winning the lottery.
That's the best ones, right? It's like the big fancy car.
That's the
like, yeah.
But like, I actually met a person literally doing this, and I kind of questioned them this way, like, well, why do you want to win the lottery? Well, I need money. Well, why do you need money? I want to pay for my kids' college, and why do you want your kids to go to college? And like, I want them to have a good life. And, it kind of gets to that point, or maybe it can go well beyond that point. But like, I think going to the end, the concept there is like, you should actually make your vision board about your children having a good life. And they might not need to go to college, and you certainly don't have to win the lottery for your kids to have a good life. And it's ridiculous to like get caught up in this like specific path. And this is where Seth's idea of spontaneity comes in, because when we let go of our disciplined idea of like cause and effect and the way things need to develop, our higher self can kind of like choose the probability that to our logical mind might seem very circuitous or like backwards. And it just puts us in position to manifest that reality in a much more efficient manner.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And in a way that would hit more of your desires, or like your, I guess, what you would want to experience or how you'd want to grow.
Yeah. Because it's less limited by like the social sort of beliefs that you're adopting.
It's less limited by the social beliefs you're adopting, yeah, but also less limited just in like the how your manifestation can come into the 3D world.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So Joe, if you see me soon that I have like pictures of all these buff dudes on my wall, it's because I went to the end.
Yeah, you went to the
I
end.
don't actually want to run. I just want to look like these buff dudes.
Yeah, you want to be able to have cool buff friends and you can all admire each other's muscles, which is the end state of the gym life.
Yeah, everyone's just lonely and they want to connect.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but it's a cool exercise because you can almost extend almost anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and sometimes it gets really abstract, right? Like I ask myself, like, well, why do I really want to like write a novel? Like, I feel like I don't. It's not for recognition. It's like discovery. Like, I want to be able to create. I want to and it emulates like sort of this sort of Sethian development. Like I want to understand how to like create reality, understand all the angles and stuff. And so,
Oh yeah, I feel like that's one of the hardest parts of that whole proposition is when you ask somebody like, well, what do you really want at bottom? Like that's a really hard question to answer.
Mm-hmm.
but I think it might even be helpful, like even if you can't have like a verbal answer. And this kind of ties back to where we started with like, what is the difference between an idea as we experience it and as we communicate it and symbolize it?
Mhm.
And so like you kind of get to the point where there's a feeling there, but you don't have a word for it. It's like either too abstract or like our language is just too limited. But like, I wonder in the sense where if you're just focusing on that, and this would be where like maybe prayer and meditation might be ways of honing in on this specific thing, is like maybe you use this verbal exercise to get to that nonverbal point, and then you try to like hold that feeling, focus on that feeling.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to try that. Cool. Guys, have any more from the end of this chapter?
I just wrote that that's the part where Seth throws Jane under the bus. But we already talked about that earlier.
In what sense?
Or I'll see if I can find it. It's at the bottom of 65. He says, we are rather slow with this material since it is new, but mainly because I would like it translated into as precise terms as possible. And without a scientific background on Rupert's part, I must use ingenuity. And yeah, so Seth's only able to channel through Jane, right? He's never like channeled through other people.
He doesn't want to channel through other
Yeah.
people to protect the integrity of the material.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of ability. I mean, and he channels through other beings in other dimensions, theoretically, right? Like
Probably.
when he says he's a teacher, I think.
Because he talks about the process of like setting up the mind of whatever. Because Seth isn't the full entity, right? Seth's the personality.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a long-standing kind of challenge. Like, what is identity? Like, it just exists on so many levels and overlapping levels. It's hard to say.
Yeah. But presumably, like, if for whatever reason the entity that Seth is was like, well, I want to channel through Robert Butts, it would be the personality would be a totally different personality that's talking through Robert, not Seth talking through Robert.
Yeah, it could be a different part of Seth or something.
Okay.
I'm not really sure exactly, but I think there is like a subjective affinity between Seth and Jane in that way. Here's another quote. These coordinate points themselves activate the behavior of atoms and molecules as, say, for example, the sun aids the growth of plants. Kind of mentioned that earlier. The coordinates activate the generating behavior of atoms and molecules and greatly encourage their cooperative abilities, their tendency to swarm, so to speak, into organizations and structural groupings.
I remember you were talking about the metaphor of like the plants with the light, you know, as being like a metaphor here for these points. And my only thought was that if listeners are very interested in that, you should look into Neoplatonist philosophy, because there's a lot of that kind of metaphor going on too. Where God is sort of described as like this emanation of light, and the light sort of like is this illuminating but also creative force that like makes things real that otherwise wouldn't be as like real as they are.
Yeah. Doesn't seem that surprising that a lot of different thinkers or systems of thought would get onto that analogy.
Yeah. This whole like emanation of light metaphor is like a really big through line.
This is where he's kind of like pointing to some of the more, this is where he is using a little of that ingenuity, but he's talking about things that are, known to our physics at this point.
That is remarkable about this part, because like there is the idea of like Jane is more of like a poet, like writer type person, but like all of the stuff with like the waves, the like electromagnetic like waves, and then how they like become turned into like molecules, and how the molecules can like compound into things. I was reading it and it was all like very strikingly like, yeah, no, like I can totally see what this is talking about and how this relates to like physics and stuff,
Yeah, I mean, this would be the place where you could like dismiss this material if it wasn't pretty on top of it, right?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
it's consistent with what we know.
Well, I had to think about too when it was written, because this is like the 80s, right?
No, this is 1970.
70?
Yeah.
So I think some of the quantum physics stuff was sort of like known at the time, but I don't know. I wonder how much like generally understood it was.
I've always been curious about that too. I think it takes a lot of study in two different departments to like, specifically in physics and this material, both big, deep subjects to like compare and contrast.
Yeah.
I feel like there's probably like hints of a lot of this stuff in physics, but maybe not as specific with certain things.
Well, because like if you think about it, like Einstein was one of the guys who was like originally working in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like Einstein was around during World War II. So it's like, that like can frame like the time frame of when we're talking about.
Yeah. We were talking about recently, like certain Renaissance periods, like it's often thought of as an art, but like I feel like the early 20th century or maybe late 19th century was that for physics.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen Oppenheimer?
I haven't seen it. Everyone says it's really good.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
I want to watch it, but
There's just so many famous big names as characters in that story.
Yeah.
Like I've been familiar with just, the few physics books I've read or, my own familiarity. So maybe it just seems that way, but it just seemed like there's some giants in that period of history for that specific.
I mean, UFOlogy people say that too.
Mhm.
That like the atomic bomb was like the thing that puts like human beings on the map as like, okay, this is like human beings matter now. Like they did atomic like fission. Like this is a big deal,
really,
You can see how that's definitely a certain type of threshold. Like we're messing with stuff that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, like some of the people who worked on some of the like atomic like weapons programs were like really into like weird like Satanist esoteric shit too.
Really?
Yeah, they were doing like weird magical sex like stuff before they made some of these bombs.
It makes me think of, we've touched on this in earlier episodes, but like there's a connection between power and responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I remember watching that film, it's like some of these people have they have a high development of like wisdom and responsibility because they're playing with these ideas, and there's always a struggle, like how are you going to use this power? And they're like handing it to the US government.
Yeah, right. Well, isn't there that thing, right, where like Oppenheimer like was trying to talk to, who was the president?
Truman,
and like Truman doesn't give a shit. He's just like, whatever, I'm gonna use them.
yeah, there's kind of a disconnect there. Like,
Yeah.
who knows what really happened, but in some sense it's amazing we haven't like blown up the planet since then.
Yeah. To me, it's one of the best pieces of evidence. Have you heard the like quantum immortality theory?
Mm-mm.
So there's this like kind of fun, if you believe in parallel universes as like an idea, there's this fun sort of thought experiment that goes like, no matter what like happens, you're going to survive in the universe that you're in, because if your consciousness like transcends all the different versions of yourself, right? Because some people believe that like you are in all these different realities, but if you are actually the person in all the realities, then your consciousness has to be in all of them at the same time. Otherwise, if they're different consciousnesses, they're different people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you are in all these realities, then in any of the realities that you die, that part of your consciousness just goes and it moves over to one next door to it. So like no matter what happens in your reality, other people can die because they'll move to a different reality, but you're never going to die in your reality. And there's sort of a interesting like...
But your reality can die.
Your reality can die. So like...
Or we should say like probability or something.
Yeah, the like probability space of whatever that is.
Yeah.
Like you're no longer in it. But the experiment that you could do, which is not possible to ever verify and also completely
destructive,
not like ethically problematic, is that the experimenter, who's the only one who can confirm if this experiment works, sets up like a shotgun with a trigger that's set to like the decay of a particle, right? Because that's totally random. And they set the shotgun up so it's pointing at their chest, and then they just wait. And then they just do this for as long as it would take to show that like statistically speaking, they really should be dead by now, but the shotgun hasn't gone off. And in every universe that you try to do this, there's a ton of universes where you get shot and everyone goes, that guy's an idiot.
Yeah.
But the universe that you're alive in, you can just sit there all week and it just won't kill you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I see why it's more of an experiment than like an actual practice.
Right, exactly. But I always think of the fact that we haven't caused nuclear Armageddon yet as sort of an interesting, like, collective quantum immortality thing, you know?
You know what that reminds me of? I read people on Reddit sometimes saying that they're at a light, turns green, they go, and then they get T-boned by like a truck going like 80 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And the next second, they're back at the light. And then the light turns green and the truck flies by. And they're like,
Whoa.
did I just die in some other reality and be like, you know, like you said, into
Yeah.
this one? Like, I don't know how else to explain that. I don't know.
You like go too far and then you like shit and then you just jump back.
You gotta
Oh,
jump back a second? That's crazy. I didn't know people had, is that like a common enough experience that people talk
It's
about?
posted probably like once a month. Like I see it once a month enough to be like, okay, this is a thing. And I don't think that people are just attention seeking or crazy.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Must be a term for it.
Glitch in the matrix.
What's in a quantum death? I don't know. Yeah, something.
I'm just gonna read a little further. The coordinate points magnify or intensify the behavior, the latent spontaneity inherent within the properties of physical matter. We got to this a little bit last time we brought up monads.
Yeah.
And this idea makes a lot of sense to me that like the medium we're dealing with has like this latent spontaneity, but it also has like this kind of infinite possibilities. It's like, you know, they're pieces that contain the whole, right? That seems like the ultimate building block for anything, which would make sense if we're creating our own reality, that like you're going to be using something that has those properties.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that like there's this whole framework of like the energy like stimulating that, you know? It's like I almost think of like an artistic depiction could be like the further away you get from it, the more you become like a little sketch of yourself as opposed to like in full color, you know? But like you wouldn't realize it. It also reminds me of like I talked about Philip Dick last episode too. But have I talked about Ubik?
Maybe, but let's hear it again.
I should read that book again. It's like a book about they're in this like reality where everything's decaying and like falling apart really fast, and they need to use this like spray called Ubik, and like you spray it on stuff and it like restores it to like actual reality instead of just degradation.
So like this is like the ultimate commodity.
Yeah, it's like a book. It's like they're living in a world that's like in an accelerated entropy sort of.
Does it happen? Is it like contagious to like people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're always like carrying this stuff around to like spray it on themselves so they don't like age too much. So they're there.
Kind of hellish.
Yeah, it's a weird
Yeah.
book. It's like a weird detective story happening in that environment. Because I feel like Philip Dick just like always does that weird thing where he makes like a really weird world and then just kind of like sets a story in it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never read any Philip K. Dick, but I should. Seen a few of the movies that have been made from his works.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go back a little bit to, I had this one marked. The intensity is the core about which electromagnetic energy units form. So that was also intriguing to me. In your terms, the more intense the core, the sooner the physical materialization. Just that idea of intensity, but like, it's interesting he uses it's the core.
Well, the core of what?
It's the core about which the electromagnetic energy units form. In your terms, the more intense the core, the sooner the physical materialization. So it's the core of the materialization.
Because doesn't he talk about like the coordinate points are sort of like these like small little like points of like energy or whatever?
That's also interesting. Yeah, he did actually bring up the size, that they're like tiny, right?
Yeah, and that you could measure the gravitational fluctuations or something.
That was like one of the hints to like figure out
Tips and tricks to scientists if you want to study this.
where coordination points is.
Go measure the gravitational pull of the...
I gotta think
Pyramids.
someday there's gonna be these little subsets of like punk scientists that like take some of these ideas seriously and try to figure out what they can figure out.
Oh, yeah.
I've tried. Some people have gotten together to try to find his coordination points.
It's like people who look for like Sasquatch.
Do you think like, yeah, in some sense, like once, you know, if this idea, you know, catches on, you know, like you're going to see people like being intentional about using these spaces. Like It's almost like you could see some like revival of certain places being like religious hubs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think of like India. There's so many people and so many like religions. Like it's such a like intense density of those things in that area.
Yeah.
Like, I wish he did, do the whole coordinate point book, because I imagine it'd be fascinating
Oh, yeah.
just to expand it to the world and get into specifics. You got anything left?
No, I'm out of gas.
Can I just read
Yeah.
this quote I found online just there
Yeah.
about Ubik?
Oh, hell yeah.
So the author's former wife, Tessa, remarked, Ubik is a metaphor for God. Ubik is all-powerful and all-knowing, and Ubik is everywhere. The spray can is only a form that Ubik takes to make it easier for people to understand it and use it. It is not the substance inside the can that helps them, but rather their faith in the promise that it will help them.
Whoa.
I find that like super Sethian.
That's so
like,
Sethian,
if you
yeah.
believe that it'll come. It's just a placebo.
That's
Literally,
pretty-
you're the one that's doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The wife is saying that?
Yeah, the author's former wife.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Ubik's weird. Dick's weird. Philip Dick is weird.
I want to, you know what? I might just like not skip, but like before I read any of his works, I might try to find like a good biography about him. It sounds interesting.
Oh, yeah. Reading his biography makes all the other stuff make way more sense.
Yeah.
Like, he's strange.
So I think, I mean, Seth would say like artists are type of speakers. And in that sense, like science fiction, and I've heard other people say this rings true to me, that like, you know, the artists get to these ideas first
Mm-hmm.
before like our systems of knowledge ever get there. And they like, in that sense, it's like super important that they lead the way. And we're like, you know, to the extent that I was talking last time, the creation of art like comes from this place where you have a sense of this abstract thing. It doesn't quite fit perfectly into reality, but your creation, the form you give it, is enough for other people to jump off from there to get to something of that same abstract space.
Yeah.
And, you know, our cultures are built this way. Like,
Yeah, it's
No.
prefiguration.
in what sense? Like,
You're prefiguring like the thing that's going to come out of the culture like later. Like you have some sense of like how it should be, but you can't do all of it because the actual reality is like bigger than you, you know?
yeah. And it really ties in, you know, I've been speaking about this on the podcast a lot, but like this idea of resonance, like nothing happens with that idea or that work of art unless it resonates with so many people, you know, like, and we might not even recognize what's resonating with us. Like, you know, like you might be, you know, a physicist that happens to have like a hobby of reading certain kinds of fiction or a certain kind of art and not realize how that's actually influencing your own, you know, protrusion into that field of knowledge.
Right.
I had one last quote here. He kind of Seth reiterates his purpose at the end of the chapter. He says, "My first purpose, therefore, is to make you aware of the inner identity of which you are a part and to clear away any of the intellectual and superstitious debris that prevents you from recognizing your own potentials and freedom." A lot of times I'm just reading this, not because they're like new concepts, but like his different ways of putting things just help them sink in. It kind of gets back to what I was saying earlier about like how much I believe like what we would determine as like false ideas like have some like inner certainty behind them that are just distorted. Seth is saying here that he wants to clear away some of the intellectual and superstitious debris. Part of like this development is just clarifying or purifying. Maybe that's too religious of a term, but you can see where it would apply.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that was chapter 5.
If you're an artist, move to Minneapolis
Or Utah.
or Chicago and New York.
Yeah, I feel like there's plenty of options for you, but we welcome artists here. For
Yeah,
sure.
bring it.
All right. Till next time.
Later.
That's our show, but fear not, the never-ending conversation continues next week. If you're enjoying the show, please be so kind as to subscribe, like, rate, and review, and if you're feeling frisky, tell a friend. Contact us at implicatingthereal@gmail.com. You can support the show at patreon.com/implicatingthereal. We are doing our best, but whatever support you can lend helps us appreciably. We are not affiliated with the publishers or proprietors, but we encourage you to get the books. You can follow along as we endeavor to dive deep into the Sethian worldview, and there's really nothing like cultivating your own relationship with material. Until next week, we wish you a fond good evening.